Hey, leave him alone.
Mind your business.
This is my business. Back off.
Thank you, young lady.
Are you okay, sir?
Wait, that's the CEO's father?
Hey, stop it. Leave him alone.
Mind your business. This is funny.
It's not funny. Here, let me help you up.
Thank you, young lady.
Let's get you out of here.
Wait, isn't he the CEO's dad?
Hey, leave him alone.
Mind your business, lady.
He's an old man. Back off.
Whoa, chill. We didn't know.
Are you okay, sir?
Thank you. My son is the CEO.
Oh.
Kind lady helps an elderly man, being mocked, unaware he is the CEO's father. The alley. The sun came up grey over Delray that morning, the kind of grey that makes a city look tired before it's even awake. Thessaly Boone walked home the way she always did. Down Junction, left at the shuttered laundromat. Past the church with the cracked sign that still said, "Blessed are the merciful," even though half the letters had peeled away years ago. She'd worked 11 hours mopping floors at Mercy General. Her feet hurt, her back hurt. There was bleach under her fingernails and a smell in her hair she could never quite wash out. She was 34 years old, and she had $4 in her purse. That was the morning she heard the laughing. It came from the alley behind Kessler's Hardware, a narrow gap between two brick walls where the city put its dumpsters and forgot about them. Young voices, 5 or 6 of them, loud, bright, having the time of their lives. Thessaly slowed down. She almost kept walking. God knows she almost kept walking. She was so tired her eyes burned, and in this neighborhood you learned early that laughter in an alley was rarely a good sign. Then she heard the other sound underneath it, an old man's voice, thin, breaking. "Please, please, son." "That's all I got." Thessaly stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. She turned her head toward the alley, and she saw it. There were 5 of them. Teenagers, maybe 19, 20 at the oldest. Nice sneakers, nicer than hers. One in a red hoodie had his phone up filming, walking a slow circle like he was shooting a music video. And on the ground between them was an old man. He was thin as a coat hanger, 70s at least. White stubble on his jaw, white curls at his temples. His shirt was a rag, genuinely a rag, brown and torn open across the chest, hanging off one shoulder. His trousers were caked with something dark. One shoe was missing. He had his hand up, not to fight, just up, palm out, the way you hold your hand when you're trying to make the world stop. The tallest boy nudged him with the toe of his sneaker. Not hard. That was the worst part. It wasn't even hard. It was the kind of nudge you'd give a dead animal on the road to see if it moved. The old man flinched anyway. The alley erupted. "Yo, he's scared. Do it again, do it again." "Grandpa, you smell like the inside of a bus." The one filming zoomed in on the old man's face. "Say something for the camera, Unc. Say something funny." The old man didn't say anything funny. He just kept his hand up, and Thessaly Boone, who had $4 in her purse and bleach under her fingernails and no reason on this earth to get involved, walked into that alley. "Hey!" Her voice came out steadier than she expected. 5 heads turned. For a second, just a second, there was that flicker young men get when an adult shows up, the old reflex. Somebody's mother is here. Then the tall one smiled, and the flicker went out. "Damn," he said. "It's a whole superhero. Leave him alone. We ain't touching him. I watched you kick him. That ain't kicking." He looked around at his friends, delighted, playing to the room. "You seen me kick him? Anybody see me kick him?" They hadn't, obviously. That was the game. Thessaly walked past him. That surprised them. She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice, didn't pull out a phone. She just walked through them like they were weather, and got down on her knees on that filthy concrete and put her hand on the old man's shoulder. "Sir, can you hear me?" Up close he smelled like wet cardboard and something sour. His eyes were wet and cloudy and moving too fast. "I'm all right," he whispered. "I'm all right, I'm all right." "You're not." She said it gently. "Where does it hurt?" "Ma'am, don't get in it. They'll turn on you." "Let 'em turn." Something in the way she said it made him look at her properly for the first time. Behind her, the red hoodie had swung his phone around. "Oh, this is content," he said. "This is content. Somebody call the news." "You know he's probably got lice, right?" one of them called. "You touching a whole lice situation right now." "She work at the hospital." A shorter one squinting at her scrubs. "Look at the shirt. She a janitor." "A janitor?" The tall one laughed like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all year. "Trash lady saving trash man. That's beautiful, man. That's a movie." Thessaly didn't turn around. She slid one arm under the old man's shoulders. "Sir, I'm going to help you sit up. Tell me if anything's broken." "Nothing's broken. Humor me." He got his elbow under himself. She took his weight. He weighed nothing. He weighed less than the mop bucket she hauled up 3 flights every night, and got him sitting against the wall. Then she took off her jacket and put it over his shoulders. The alley went a little quieter. It's a strange thing about cruelty. It's loud until somebody does something kind right in front of it. Then it doesn't know where to look. "That's your coat," the old man said. "I got another one." She didn't. But that wasn't his business. The tall one recovered first. They always do. "Yo, superhero." He stepped closer. "You gonna take him home too? Feed him? Adopt him?" Thessaly stood up. She was 5'4" in flat shoes. He had 6 inches on her easy. She looked up at him anyway, and she asked him a question in a very calm voice. "What's your grandmother's name?" He blinked. "What?" "Your grandmother." "What's her name?" "Man, why you asking me about my—" "Because somewhere in this city there's an old woman who prays for you by name." Thessaly's voice didn't rise. That was what made it terrible. "Every night, out loud, says your whole name to God like it's precious. And you're out here in an alley at 7 in the morning, kicking a man who could be somebody else's father." Silence. The red hoodie lowered his phone about 6 inches. "She'd be so proud," Thessaly said. The tall one's jaw worked. For 1 second, one honest second, something crossed his face that looked almost like a boy. Then he laughed too loud and shoved past her hard enough that she stumbled into the brick. "Y'all hear this lady? Y'all hear her?" He was already walking away, arms out, playing to his friends, preaching in an alley. "Get a church lady." They went. The way they always go. Loud, laughing, bumping shoulders, already turning it into a story they'd tell later where they came out looking better. The red hoodie was the last to leave. He walked backwards a few steps, phone still up, and he said something Thessaly wouldn't understand for another 11 days. "You gonna wish you ain't did that." Then the alley was empty, and it was just the two of them, and the sound of a bus hissing somewhere over on Fort Street. "You shouldn't have done that," the old man said. Thessaly rubbed her shoulder where the brick had caught it. "Probably not. They'll remember your face. They'll forget it by lunch." She crouched back down. "Can you stand?" "I can stand." He couldn't. He got halfway up and his knee folded like wet paper, and she caught him under the arms, and for a second they were just 2 people holding each other up in a dirty alley. "Okay," she said. "Okay, new plan. I don't need—" "Sir, with all respect, you are shaking. It's cold. It's 58 degrees. He looked at her, and then for the first time, the old man smiled. It changed his whole face. He had good teeth. Thessaly noticed that and didn't think about it, not then. "You always this stubborn?" he asked. "My mama was worse." "Then God rest your mama." He straightened up as much as he could and stuck out one filthy hand, formal as a banker. "Amos." She shook it. "Thessaly." "Thessaly." He tried it out. "That's a rare one." "Mama read it in a book, never told me which." "It's a good name. It sounds like somebody." And Thessaly Boone laughed, actually laughed, standing in an alley at 7 in the morning, after 11 hours on her feet. And that was the moment. That was the hinge everything turned on, though neither one of them knew it. "Come on, Amos," she said. "I got soup." She took him home. That was the thing about Thessaly. She didn't agonize over it, didn't weigh it, didn't call anybody for advice. Her mother had raised her in a house where the pot was always a little bigger than the family, and where the front door had a chair beside it, because somebody was always going to need to sit down. Her apartment was 2 rooms over a check-cashing place on Vernon. The radiator worked when it wanted to. She sat him at the little table by the window, put the kettle on, and pulled the last of the chicken soup out of the fridge. He ate like a man who'd been taught not to. Slow, napkin in his lap. He'd stop between spoonfuls and set the spoon down properly on the edge of the bowl. Thessaly watched that and filed it away without knowing why. "You got people?" she asked. Amos took a long time answering. "I got a son." "He around?" "He's around." Amos turned the spoon over. "We had words, long time back, about what a man's worth." "He win?" "No," Amos said. "Neither did I." Thessaly refilled his cup. She didn't push. In her experience, people told you things when they were ready, and pushing only made the door close. "You can sleep on the couch," she said. "One night. Then we figure out something better. You don't know me. I know you're 70-something and somebody kicked you into the ground while 5 people laughed. That's not knowing a man. It's a start." Amos set down his spoon. He looked out the window at the grey morning and the check-cashing sign and the pigeons on the wire. And when he spoke, his voice had changed. It had gotten careful. "Thessaly, can I ask you something?" Why'd you stop?" She thought about it. Really thought, because he'd asked like he wanted a real answer. "Because nobody stopped for my mother," she said. Amos went very still. "She fell outside the Rite Aid on Michigan," Thessaly said. "Diabetic episode. 41 minutes on the sidewalk. Store camera caught the whole thing. 19 people walked past her. I counted them 19 times. The radiator clanked. She died on the way to Mercy," Thessaly said. "Same hospital I'm up now. Every night I pushed that bucket past the door she came through. She said it plain, no tears. She'd cried all those out years ago, and what was left was just the fact of it, worn smooth like a stone in a pocket. So when I see somebody on the ground," she said, "I stop. That's all. That's the whole reason. It ain't noble. It's just, that's 41 minutes I can't get back. And I'm not adding to nobody else's." Amos Cadwallader sat in a 2-room apartment over a check-cashing place with a stranger's jacket around his shoulders and soup going cold in front of him. And when he finally spoke, his voice wasn't quite steady. "What hospital did you say you worked at?" "Mercy General, housekeeping. Been there 9 years. 9 years? He nodded slowly. "You like it?" "I like eating." He laughed. Then he stopped laughing. "Thessaly." He was looking at his hands now. "That video those boys made, the one with the phone. What about it? Where does that go?" She shrugged, already carrying the bowl to the sink. "Internet, I guess. Nowhere. Those boys got 200 followers between them." Amos didn't answer. Because Amos Cadwallader had spent 41 years running a company that moved 11,000 trucks a day, and he had learned exactly one thing about the internet that Thessaly had not. Nothing goes nowhere. The video went up at 8:14 that morning. By noon, it had 4,000 views. By 6 that evening, a woman named Renata Volkov, Director of Environmental Services at Mercy General Hospital, was watching it for the 3rd time in her office, with the door closed. Her mouth pulled into a hard, flat line. She paused it on the frame where Thessaly's face was clearest. Then she picked up her phone. "Yes. Hi, it's Renata. I need tomorrow's shift roster pulled." A pause. "No, not the whole thing. Just one name." The roster Thessaly Boone had never been called to the 4th floor before. In 9 years at Mercy General, she had cleaned the 4th floor 11,000 times. She knew which drawer in the break room stuck. She knew the exact spot in the hallway where the wax always wore thin. She'd cleaned Renata Volkov's office every Tuesday for 6 years and had never once been inside it while Renata Volkov was in it. The email said 9 a.m. It said, "Please bring your badge." Thessaly read that line 4 times on the bus. Please bring your badge. You don't bring your badge to a meeting. You bring your badge to the last meeting. Renata Volkov was 51, silver blonde, and beautifully dressed in the way of a woman who has decided that being underestimated is the greater humiliation. She had a laptop open on the desk in front of her. She did not offer Thessaly a seat. "Miss Boone, thank you for coming up." "Yes, ma'am." "Do you know why you're here?" "No, ma'am." Renata turned the laptop around, and there it was. Paused. Thessaly on her knees on the alley concrete, her hand on a stranger's shoulder, her face lit up hard by the morning sun. Under it, 2.1 m views. Thessaly's stomach dropped straight through the floor. 2.1 million, Renata said pleasantly. As of 6 this morning. It was 400,000 when I went to bed. "Ma'am, I didn't. You're wearing our scrubs." Thessaly stopped. "You're wearing our scrubs," Renata repeated, "with our logo on the left breast, in an alley behind a hardware store, in a physical altercation, on a recording that 2 million people have now watched." She folded her hands. "Do you understand the position that puts this institution in?" "There wasn't an altercation. I never touched nobody. You were shoved into a wall. By him, on camera, in our uniform." Renata's voice never rose. It never had to. "Mercy General has a community reputation, Miss Boone. We spend a great deal of money on that reputation. And this morning our name is attached to a street brawl. He was 70 years old, and they were kicking him. That is not our concern." Thessaly heard herself say it before she could stop it. "It should be." The room got very quiet. Renata Volkov leaned back in her chair, and for the first time she smiled, and Thessaly understood with a cold, sick clarity that this had been decided before she ever walked in. "You've been with us 9 years, Renata said. 9 years in March. Any write-ups?" "No, ma'am." "That's right. None." Renata pulled a folder toward her without looking at it. "Which is why this is a separation, not a termination for cause. You'll receive 2 weeks. That's more than policy requires. I'd like you to remember that." Thessaly stood there in the middle of that office and felt the floor she'd waxed 1,000 times tilting under her. "Ma'am?" Her voice came out wrong. "I got rent on the 9th. "I understand. Do you?" It wasn't a question. "Ma'am, I've been here 9 years. I worked through the ice storm. I walked here. 4 miles I walked here when the buses stopped. I worked the whole COVID stretch on the isolation floor when 3 people quit in 1 week. Ms. Boone, and you're firing me for helping an old man on the ground." "I'm separating you," Renata said, "for wearing our name into a situation you chose to enter." Chose to enter. Thessaly would think about those 3 words for a long time afterward, turning them over, because that was exactly what she'd done. She'd chosen. She'd stood on that sidewalk with her feet screaming, and she had chosen, and this was the bill. She unclipped her badge. She set it on the desk, right on the corner, square with the edge, because 9 years of doing things properly doesn't leave you just because the reason for it does. "Ma'am," she said, "can I ask you one thing?" Renata inclined her head. "If it was your daddy on that ground, and a woman in any uniform stopped..." Thessaly looked at her. "Would you fire her too?" Renata Volkov didn't answer. She just turned the laptop back around. Amos was sitting on the front steps when Thessaly got home at 10 in the morning. He had her dead husband's coat on. She'd given it to him the night before, the good wool one that had hung in the closet for 6 years because she couldn't wear it and couldn't throw it out. and he had a paper cup of coffee from the gas station on the corner, and he was watching the street like a man reading a newspaper. He looked up. He looked at her face. He looked at the empty clip on her scrubs where the badge went. He didn't say anything for a while. Then, quietly, "They let you go." Thessaly sat down on the step beside him. The concrete was cold through her scrubs. 2 weeks' pay, she said, for the alley. For the uniform. She laughed and it came out ugly. Wasn't even about you. It was about the logo. Amos turned his coffee cup slowly in his hands. How much were they paying you, daughter? $16.40 an hour. $16.40? He nodded like a man confirming a figure. 9 years. 9 years in March. They give you a raise in that time? $10 total. Thessaly rubbed her face with both hands. Amos, I'm sorry. I don't mean to unload on you. You got your own... Don't apologize to me. He said it sharp enough that she looked up. Don't you apologize to me. His jaw was tight. There was something working behind his eyes that Thessaly, if she hadn't been so tired, might have found strange, because it wasn't pity. Pity is soft. This was hard and cold, and it had a shape to it. It looked honestly like a man doing arithmetic. I'll find something, she said. There's always something. Rent's due when? 9th. How much? Amos, how much? $9.75. He nodded and drank his coffee and said nothing else. And Thessaly assumed, reasonably, because what else would you assume about a man in a torn shirt sleeping on your couch? That he was just an old man making conversation about numbers he'd never see. Here is what Thessaly did over the next 9 days. She applied to 22 jobs. She got 4 interviews. 2 of them ended the moment she gave her employment history because the manager typed her name into a search bar while she was sitting right there, and she watched their face change as the video loaded. That's you. That's me. Huh. A long pause. We'll be in touch. They were not in touch. The video had passed 6 million by then. It had a title now. Somebody had put a title on it. Janitor Lady Gets Bodied Defending Homeless Guy. And it had a soundtrack and it had comments, 40,000 of them, and about half were people calling her a hero and about half were people who had decided she was a lunatic or worse. Bro, she a whole clout chaser staged. 100% staged. Why would you touch a homeless man? Do you know what he could have imagined losing your job for this? That last one had 11,000 likes. Thessaly stopped looking after day 3. She sold her mother's ring on day 6. Not the wedding band, she couldn't, not that, but the little garnet one, the one from Mama's own mother. And the man behind the glass at the pawn shop on Springwells gave her $140 and slid it into a plastic tray like it was nothing. She cried in the parking lot for 2 minutes exactly, timed it, wiped her face, and went to the grocery store. And every one of those 9 days, Amos was there. That was the strange part. He didn't leave. She'd told him one night. He'd stayed 9. And she never asked him to go because, and she'd have been embarrassed to admit this to anybody, the apartment was warmer with him in it. He was up before her every morning. Coffee made. Not good coffee, but made. He fixed the radiator valve with a wrench he found under the sink, and it stopped clanking for the first time in 3 winters. He fixed the drawer in the kitchen that stuck. He fixed the toilet chain. Where'd you learn all this? She asked him. Loading docks. He was flat on his back under the sink. Started at 19. You learned to fix what breaks or you stand around not getting paid. You were a driver. Something like that. Thessaly noticed things in those 9 days. She noticed them the way you notice a sound in a house at night, not enough to get up, just enough to file away. She noticed that he ate with a napkin in his lap every single time, even eating cereal, standing at the counter. She noticed that his hands were clean, not washed clean. She'd given him a shower the first night, but soft, A man who'd slept outside for months has hands like sandpaper. Amos's hands had calluses in old places, faded the way scars fade. She noticed the mark on his left wrist, a pale band, perfectly even, a shade lighter than the rest of his arm, the kind of line a watch leaves after 20 years of sun. She noticed that when the news came on and the anchor said something about a logistics merger, Amos's head came up like a dog hearing a car in the driveway. And she noticed the way he asked questions. How many people work housekeeping at Mercy? 60, 65. They all making 16.40? Some less. New ones start at 15. Who sets that? I don't know, Amos. Somebody in an office. Somebody in an office, he repeated. And he wrote nothing down, and he didn't have to, and Thessaly went to bed, thinking nothing of it at all. On the 10th day, she came home and found him at the kitchen table with the good coat folded over the chair back, and he said, "Sit down a minute." She sat. "You've fed me 10 days, Amos said. You've given me a couch and a coat, and you never once asked me for a thing. Not once. You never asked me what I did, or how I got where I got, or when I was leaving. Wasn't my business." That's exactly it. He nodded slowly. That's exactly it. And you'd be amazed how rare that is. He put both hands flat on the table. Thessaly, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me get all the way through it before you say anything. Can you do that? And Thessaly Boone, who had lost her job and sold her grandmother's ring and had $211 to her name and rent due tomorrow, felt her chest go tight with an emotion she couldn't name. "Okay," she said. Amos opened his mouth and somebody knocked on the door. It wasn't a knock, really. It was 3 flat bangs with the side of a fist. Thessaly got up, looked through the peephole, and her blood went cold. There were 2 of them in the hallway. The tall one from the alley, she'd know that face till the day she died, and the one in the red hoodie. The tall one was holding a phone up, filming, already live. "Thessaly Boone," he called through the door, loud, performing. "Thessaly Boone, we know you in there." Behind her, at the table, Amos had gone absolutely still. "Yo, this the address," the red hoodie was saying to the camera. "This it. Y'all wanted the follow-up. This the follow-up. 6 million people watched you get dropped," the tall one shouted. "You want to say something now? You want to preach now? Where the sermon at?" Thessaly's hand was on the chain. "Don't," Amos said quietly. "They found my house, Amos." "I know. Don't open it." "How'd they even—" "Somebody in the comments." His voice was very level and very cold. "Somebody always finds it. Somebody always posts it." The banging came again, harder. "Open the door, superhero." And then the tall one said something else, casual, tossed off, mostly for the camera. That changed everything. "And tell that old man he can come out too. We know he up in there. We know he up in there, 'cause Renata told us." Thessaly turned around slowly. "What did he just say?" she whispered. Amos Cadwallader was already standing, and he did not look like a homeless man anymore, not even a little. He was standing straight for the first time in 10 days, shoulders squared, chin up, one hand flat on the table. And there was something on his face that Thessaly had never seen there and would never forget. "Amos." Her voice was shaking. "How do those boys know Renata Volkov?" Amos looked at the door. "Because somebody's paying them," he said. The watch line. The banging stopped at 6:40, not because the boys got tired, because Mrs. Okonkwo across the hall opened her door in a housecoat, took one look and said in a voice that had run a middle school cafeteria for 26 years, "I have already called them. They are already coming. Do you want to be here?" They did not want to be there. Thessaly heard them clatter down the stairs, still filming, still narrating. their voices getting smaller and smaller until there was nothing but the sound of the check-cashing sign buzzing outside. She stood with her back against the door for a long moment. Then she turned around. Amos was still standing at the table. "Sit down," Thessaly said. "Thessaly, Amos." Her voice cracked right down the middle. "Sit down." He sat. She stayed by the door, arms crossed tight over her chest, because she didn't trust herself any closer. "Who are you?" she said. "My name is Amos Cadwallader," he said. "That part's true. All of it's true. I just left things out. Start putting them back." He nodded. He looked in that moment older than he'd looked in the alley. "I was born 9 blocks from here," he said. "Delray, 1949. My father loaded produce trucks at the Eastern Market, and my mother cleaned houses in Grosser Point, rode 2 buses each way, every day, 41 years. Thessaly said nothing. "I started on a dock at 19. Freight. I was good at it. Not strong, I was never strong, but I could look at a trailer and see how it ought to be packed. That's a thing you either see or you don't." He turned his hands over. "By 30, I had 2 trucks of my own. By 40, I had 90. By 60... He stopped. "By 60, Thessaly said. By 60, I had a company called Cadwallader Freight Systems." He said it flat, like a man reading a charge sheet. "It moves about 11,000 trucks a day. It employs 140,000 people in 4 countries. My son runs it now. He's been chief executive for 6 years, the refrigerator hummed. "You're rich," Thessaly said. "Yes." "How rich?" "Thessaly, how rich?" Amos looked at the table. "The company's valued around $4 billion, he said. "I hold a bit under half." Thessaly Boone sat down on the floor. She actually did. Her knees just went, and she sat down on the linoleum with her back against the door, and she started to laugh. And the laugh had something terrible in it. "I gave you soup," she said. "Thessaly, I gave you soup." She pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes. "I sold my grandmother's ring on Thursday. I sold Mama's ring for $140, and you were asleep on my couch, and you had $4 billion. $2 billion, he said. "And it isn't—" "Don't," he stopped. "Don't you correct me," she said. "Don't you dare." "You're right." He put his hands flat on the table. "You're right. I'm sorry." She didn't speak for a full minute. He let her not speak. That was one thing about Amos Cadwallader. He had spent 40 years in rooms where the man who talked first lost, and he knew how to let a silence stand. "Why?" Thessaly finally said. "Why was I in that alley? Why were you in that alley, in a torn-up shirt with no shoe, getting kicked by children when you own half a company?" Amos was quiet. "Because I was trying to find out if this neighborhood still had anything in it," he said. "What does that mean?" "It means my company's putting a distribution hub on the old Solvay lot. 1,100 jobs." He rubbed his jaw. "Board wanted it in Ohio. Cheaper land, better tax package, no legacy contamination. Obadiah, my son, Obadiah wanted Ohio too. He had the numbers to prove it, and his numbers were right. So why not Ohio? Because I told him you can't read a neighborhood off a spreadsheet." Amos's voice got rough, and he said, and I'll remember this the rest of my life, he said, "Dad, you're sentimental about a place that stopped existing in 1981. Thessaly watched him. "We didn't speak for 4 months, Amos said. 4 months over a parking lot. So you came here. So I came here 3 weeks ago. Nobody knew but my driver." He gestured at himself, at the torn shirt he was still wearing under her husband's good coat. "You want to know what a place is really like. You don't tour it in a suit with the mayor. You sit on the sidewalk and you see who looks at you." "And?" Amos laughed. It wasn't a good laugh. 19 days, he said. 19 days, daughter. You know how many people spoke to me? 2. A woman. outside the Coney Island gave me half a sandwich and told me God bless. And a man named Tito, who runs the barber shop on Junction, let me use the bathroom and didn't make me ask twice. That's two. That's two. In 19 days. He looked up at her. And then there was you. Thessaly looked away. You were number 3, Amos said, and you were the only one who got hurt for it. Shoved into a wall, lost your job, sold your mother's ring, had those boys at your door. Grandmother's ring, grandmother's ring. He said it carefully, like it mattered that he got it right. I'm sorry. You should have told me, she said. Day 1, in the alley. Would you have taken me home? Thessaly opened her mouth and then closed it, because the honest answer was no. If a man in an alley had said, I own $2 billion, may I sleep on your couch? She'd have called someone. She'd have assumed he was sick. She'd have been kind about it. She'd have been gentle. And she would absolutely not have made him soup. That's what I thought, Amos said gently. That's not fair. It's not. But it's true. He turned his coffee cup. Thessaly, I've had money for 30 years. You know what money does? It makes it impossible to ever know one single thing for certain again. Like what? Like whether anybody's actually kind. The room went quiet. Everybody's kind to me, Amos said. Everybody has been kind to me for 30 years. They laugh at what I say. They agree with what I think. I have 400 people in my phone, and I couldn't tell you which 2 would sit with me if I got a bad scan. He looked at his hands. You know what that does to an old man? Thessaly didn't answer. And then I sit on a sidewalk with a hole in my shirt, he said, and I find out. In 19 days, I find out more about human beings than I learned in 30 years of dinners. That's an expensive way to learn it. It was free, Amos said. That's the whole point. It was free, and I couldn't buy it for $2 billion, and a woman with $4 in her purse gave it to me for nothing. Thessaly got up off the floor. She didn't say she forgave him. She just got up and got the kettle and put it on, and that was its own kind of answer. Okay, she said. Okay. Then explain the boys. Amos's face changed instantly. Yeah, he said. The boys. They said Renata told them. Renata Volkov, the woman who fired me. Thessaly set 2 cups down hard. How does a hospital director know 5 kids from Junction Street? She doesn't, Amos said. She knows one. Which one? The tall one. He rubbed his eyes. Thessaly, I've had a man looking into this since the day they let you go. His name's Whitlock. He's been my security director 11 years, and he's very, very good. You had somebody investigating? From my couch? On my phone. In the bathroom. At 6 in the morning. He at least had the grace to look ashamed. The tall one's name is Courtney Volkov Bruce. Renata Volkov is his aunt, his mother's sister. Thessaly set the kettle down very slowly. Say that again. The boy who kicked me, Amos said, is the nephew of the woman who fired you for helping me. No. Thessaly shook her head. No, that's coincidence. This city ain't that big. It's not coincidence. Amos, it's not coincidence, and I'll tell you exactly why. He leaned forward. Because Renata Volkov didn't fire you the day the video went up. Think back. When did she call you in? Thessaly thought. The next day. The next morning, 9 a.m., Amos nodded. Whitlock pulled the hospital's visitor log. You want to know who signed into Mercy General at 7:52 p.m. the night before? Thessaly's mouth had gone dry. Courtney, she said. Courtney Volkov Bruce. Visitor badge, 4th floor. 40 minutes. Amos's voice was very quiet now. He went to his aunt's office and he showed her that video, Thessaly. And she watched it. And she saw her sister's boy on camera kicking an old man into the ground where 6 million people could see it. Oh my God. So she needed the video to be about something else. Amos spread his hands. She needed it to be about a hospital employee behaving badly in uniform. Because the second it's a staffing story, it stops being a nephew story. Thessaly sat down, hard. She burned me, she said, to cover him. She burned you to cover him. 9 years. Her voice was very small. 9 years, and I was just the cheapest thing on the table. Amos didn't say anything to that. There wasn't anything to say to that, and he was old enough to know it. They sat there a long time while the kettle went cold. "There's more," Amos said eventually. "Course there is. Whitlock says those boys have been paid. Small amounts, cash app, 4 transfers over 11 days. Not from Renata directly. She's not stupid, but from an account that gets funded from one she controls. Paid to do what? To keep the story alive." Amos's jaw tightened. "To keep making videos about you. To keep you looking unstable. Because as long as you're the story, nobody's asking who the boy in the black shirt was. That's why they came here tonight. That's why they came here tonight." Thessaly put her face in her hands. "Amos, I can't fight a hospital. I got $200 and no lawyer and no job, and the internet thinks I'm a joke. Thessaly. And she's got a title on a door and a whole institution behind her, and I'm a janitor. Thessaly!" Amos reached across the table and took her wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Look at me." She looked at him. "You are not fighting a hospital," Amos Cadwallader said. And then he did something she'd never seen him do. He pulled a phone out of his coat pocket. Not a cheap one, a real one, thin and black, and he unlocked it with his thumb, and Thessaly saw the screen light up with more notifications than she'd ever seen on a device in her life. Hundreds, a solid wall of them, scrolling. "You've had that the whole time," she said. "I have. In my house. I have." He was already scrolling. "And I'm going to make one call with it now. And I want you to sit right there while I do it, because you have earned the right to hear every word." He pressed a name. It rang twice. Then a voice came through the speaker. Deep, controlled. A voice that was clearly used to being the last one in a room to talk. "Dad." Amos didn't blink. "Obadiah," he said. "I need you in Detroit tomorrow." A pause. "Dad, I'm in Toronto. I have the Delaney board at 9, then—" "Cancel it." "Say that again." "Cancel it," Amos said. "All of it. Bring Whitlock and bring Ferrante and bring whoever handles our people at Mercy General, because we hold 4% of their operating grant, and I want to know exactly how much noise that 4% can make." Another pause. Longer. "Dad." The voice had changed. It had gotten careful. "Where have you been for 3 weeks?" "Delray." "What do you mean, Delray?" "I mean I've been sitting on the sidewalk in Delray for 19 days, Amos said, "finding out what you refuse to believe." Silence on the line. "And son," Amos said, "before you get here, I want you to watch a video. 6 million people have already seen it. In it, 5 boys are kicking an old man in an alley behind Kessler's Hardware." Thessaly's heart was pounding. "Okay. Watch it all the way through," Amos said, "because at 41 seconds, a woman walks into frame." He looked across the table at Thessaly Boone. "And she's the only person in this entire city," he said, "who stopped for your father." They came at 11:40 the next morning. Thessaly heard them before she saw them. That low, expensive hum a good engine makes. 3 of them. Coming up Vernal slow, she pulled the curtain back 2 inches. 3 black SUVs. They pulled in nose to tail outside the check-cashing place, and the whole street stopped. Somebody's kid on a bike put his foot down. A man in the barbershop doorway leaned out. Mrs. Okonkwo's curtain moved. Doors opened. The first man out was 50-something, thick through the shoulders, grey at the temples, wearing a suit that didn't quite hide what he did for a living. He scanned the street once, both directions, the way you check a room. Whitlock, Thessaly thought. Then the back door of the middle SUV opened, and Obadiah Cadwallader stepped out onto Verna Street. He was tall, That was the first thing. 6'3", maybe more, and built like a man who still found time for it. Black, mid-40s, close-cut hair, going silver at the sides. Charcoal suit, no tie. One hand in his pocket. He did not look up at the building. He stood on the sidewalk with his back to the cars, and he looked down, at the concrete, at the cracked curb, at the storm drain, the way a man looks at a place he's only ever seen in a photograph. Then he looked up at the second-floor window. Thessaly let the curtain fall. "That's him," she said. Amos was standing by the door with his hand on the knob. He'd shaved. Whitlock had sent clothes ahead that morning, a plain grey shirt, grey trousers, ordinary shoes. And Thessaly had watched a homeless man walk into her bathroom and a completely different creature walk out of it. He hadn't taken the good wool coat off, though. Her husband's coat. He had that over his arm, folded. Thessaly. Amos didn't turn around. "Whatever he says in the next 10 minutes, I want you to know he isn't a cruel man. He's a correct man. It's worse, mostly." "Amos!" There were feet on the stairs. Obadiah Cadwallader filled the doorway. He looked at his father, standing in a 2-room apartment over a check-cashing place, in clothes off a rack. He didn't say hello. 19 days, Obadiah said. 22 now. 19 days sitting on a sidewalk, at 76, with a bad knee and a stent. His voice was absolutely level and absolutely furious. "Dad, do you have any idea I had Whitlock's people checking the morgue? The morgue. Twice. I told you I was traveling. You told Marisol you were traveling. You didn't tell me anything because we weren't speaking, because you decided a parking lot was worth 4 months of not speaking to your son." It was never about the parking lot. It was always about the parking lot. It was about you calling me sentimental. The words hit the walls. Thessaly stood very still by the sink. Amos's chest was rising and falling. He put a hand on the back of the chair. "You said I was sentimental about a place that stopped existing," he said. "And, son, I've been thinking about that sentence for 4 months, because you weren't wrong that I'm sentimental. You were wrong that it stopped existing." "Dad!" 19 days, Amos said, "and I got kicked into the ground by children who thought it was funny, so you tell me. Was I wrong?" Obadiah's jaw worked. "No," he said. "That proves my point." "Does it?" "Yes, it does. 5 kids kicked my father in an alley. That's what's there, Dad. That's the neighborhood you want me to put 1,100 jobs in." "Then you didn't watch the whole video," Amos said. Silence. And Obadiah Cadwallader turned his head for the first time and looked at the woman standing by the sink. He looked at her for a long time. Thessaly made herself stand up straight. She was wearing her second-best jeans and a sweater with a snag in the sleeve, and she had never in her life felt so aware of a snag in a sleeve. "You're her," Obadiah said. "Thessaly Boone." Obadiah Cadwallader. He crossed the room and put his hand out, and she shook it, and his grip was careful, the careful of a big man who has learned to be. "Miss Boone, I watched that video 11 times on the plane. I ain't watched it once all the way through." "Don't," he said. "Not the comments, anyway." Little late. Something moved behind his eyes. He let go of her hand. He looked around the apartment, the 2 rooms, the radiator, the couch with the folded blanket squared away on the arm, the 4 dining chairs that didn't match. He looked at the counter where a pot was sitting, because there was nowhere else to put a pot. "My father slept on that couch," he said. 10 nights. You didn't know who he was." "I knew he was cold." Obadiah's face did something complicated. He walked to the window, stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking down at Verner Street and 3 black SUVs and about 40 people who had come out onto the sidewalk to see what was happening. "Miss Boone," he said, still facing the window. Can I tell you the truth about myself? Okay. I was born 11 blocks from here. Delray Baptist, my mother's church, is a mile and a half that way. He nodded at the glass. I got out at 18 and I've spent 28 years being extremely proud of that. And somewhere in there, I started thinking that getting out meant I'd understood it. That I knew what this place was, and there was nothing left in it worth putting money into. He turned around. And my father sat on a sidewalk for 19 days, and 3 people spoke to him, Obadiah said, and one of them lost everything for it. I ain't lost everything. You lost your job, your income, your grandmother's ring, and your privacy, he said, in 11 days, for helping an old man off the ground. He held her eyes. Ms. Boone, I run a company with 140,000 employees, and I could not tell you the name of one person on this earth who would take that trade. Thessaly's throat had gone tight. It weren't a trade, she said. It was just a Tuesday. And Obadiah Cadwallader, CEO, $4 billion, Delaney board at 9, laughed and had to look away and put his hand over his mouth for a second. Yeah, he said. Dad said you'd say something like that. Whitlock came up at noon with a folder. They spread it on Thessaly's kitchen table, the same table where she'd eaten cereal alone for 6 years, and it was the strangest thing she'd ever seen. 3 men in good clothes and 1 hospital janitor going through paper under a bare bulb. Courtney Volkoff Bruce, Whitlock said. 19, Renata Volkoff's nephew. 2 priors, both dismissed. Dismissed how? Obadiah asked. Complainants withdrew, both times, both within a week. Whitlock didn't editorialize. He didn't have to. The transfers, 4. Cash App, 200, 200, 350, 400. Funded from an account in the name of a Volkoff family trust. He laid out the screenshots. It's sloppy. She wasn't hiding it from investigators. She was hiding it from her sister. And the termination? Ms. Boone was separated at 9:14 a.m. Courtney signed into the hospital at 7:52 p.m. the prior evening, 4th floor, out at 8:31. Whitlock set down one more sheet. And at 8:47 p.m., Ms. Volkoff emailed HR requesting the housekeeping roster be pulled for 1 employee. Ms. Boone's name is in the subject line. Amos sat back. She wrote it down, he said. People always write it down, said Whitlock. Obadiah picked up that last sheet and read it twice. Then he set it on the table, squared it with the edge, and said something very quietly. Get me the chair of Mercy's board. Sir, it's Saturday. Get me the chair of Mercy's board. At 2:15 that afternoon, 5 boys were sitting on the low wall outside the Junction Market. And Courtney Volkoff Bruce was telling a story with his hands. They didn't see the SUVs until they were already stopped. They didn't stand up. That was the thing about Courtney. He never stood up. He watched Whitlock get out, and the second man, and he leaned back on his elbows and put a grin on. Oh, he said, you're lost? Then the back door opened, and Obadiah Cadwallader got out, and behind him, moving slower, an old man in a good wool coat. Courtney's face changed by degrees. First confusion, then recognition, then something that wasn't fear yet but was on the road to it. Yo. He sat up. Yo, that's the... Stand up, Obadiah said. Man, who is you? Stand up. Courtney stood up. So did the other 4. 19-year-olds are 19-year-olds, and something in that voice went past all the performance and hit the part of them that was still 11. By then, people were coming out, the barbershop emptied. A woman came out of the market with her hands still wet. Phones were up, everywhere, 20 phones, 30, and this time it wasn't 5 boys filming an old man. It was a whole street filming 5 boys. Obadiah stood on the sidewalk in a $4,000 suit, and he did not raise his voice again. My name is Obadiah Cadwallader, he said. I run Cadwallader Freight, 11,000 trucks, 140,000 employees. Nobody moved. 3 weeks ago, my father came back to the neighborhood he was born in to decide whether to build a distribution center on the Solvay lot. 1,100 jobs. Starting wage $26 an hour with benefits. A sound went through the crowd, low, involuntary. He came dressed like a man with nothing, Obadiah said, because he wanted to know who this neighborhood was when nobody was performing. He turned and looked at Courtney Volkoff Bruce. And you showed him. Courtney's mouth opened. You kicked a 76-year-old man into the concrete, Obadiah said. And you filmed it, and you put a laughing sound over it. Because you thought he was nobody. I know, that's exactly right. Obadiah's voice cut clean through it. You didn't know. That's the whole point, son. That's the entire point. You didn't know who he was. He looked around the street, at all the phones. You never know who he is, Obadiah said. That's why you don't do it. The silence on Junction Street was total. Then the old man stepped forward. Amos Cadwallader walked up to Courtney Volkoff Bruce until there was maybe 3 feet between them, and he looked up at him. Because Courtney was taller, Courtney had always been taller, and he said something nobody expected. What's your grandmother's name? Courtney flinched like he'd been slapped. That woman asked you that, Amos said. In the alley, on her knees on the ground, and you shoved her into a wall for it. Courtney's eyes had gone glassy. Odessa, he said. Say it again. Odessa Bruce. His voice cracked on it. She raised me, and she prays for you by name. Courtney Volkoff Bruce, 19 years old, standing on Junction Street in front of 40 people and 30 phones, put his hand over his eyes. Yeah, he said. So does she know? Amos asked. Does Odessa know what you did in that alley? He didn't answer. Does she know your aunt paid you to keep going? Amos said. 4 transfers, 11 days, to keep making videos about a woman who lost her job for helping me? That landed differently. Courtney's head came up fast. So did the red hoodies. Wait. The red hoodie stepped forward and his voice had gone thin. Wait. What? Courtney. Courtney, you said that was your money. Shut up, Deshawn. You said your aunt was helping us out. You ain't say she was. Deshawn turned to Obadiah, and there were tears standing in his eyes, and he was suddenly and completely 19 years old. Sir, we ain't know she got fired. I swear to God. We ain't know that lady lost her job. And that was when Thessaly Boone got out of the 3rd SUV. The street noise dropped like somebody had cut a wire. She walked up the sidewalk in her second-best jeans and the sweater with the snag in the sleeve, and 40 people who had watched her get shoved into a wall 6 million times watched her come. She stopped in front of Courtney. He couldn't look at her. Look at me, she said. He did. His face was wet. Thessaly Boone stood there a long moment. I forgive you, she said. Courtney made a sound. I ain't saying it's okay, she said. It ain't okay. You hurt a old man and you cost me 9 years and you came to my door. Her voice shook and she let it. But I ain't carrying you around for the rest of my life. I got too much to carry already. So I'm putting you down, right here, on this sidewalk. She looked at all 5 of them. Y'all go home, she said. Go call your grandmothers. Courtney Volkoff Bruce broke completely, and a 19-year-old boy sat down on the curb outside the Junction Market with his hands over his face while his friends stood around him, not knowing what to do, and 30 phones recorded every second of it. That video went up at 3:02 p.m. By midnight it had passed the first one. At 9:40 that night, in a house in Grosse Pointe Farms, Renata Volkoff watched it for the 9th time. She watched her nephew break down on a curb. She watched a janitor forgive him. She watched a man in a charcoal suit say the words Cadwallader Freight to a street full of cameras. Then she opened her laptop and logged into a system she was not supposed to be able to access after termination of an employee, and she began typing. She was still typing at 2 a.m., By Monday morning, there would be a document in Thessaly Boone's personnel file that had not existed on Friday. It would be dated 8 months earlier, and it would accuse her of stealing medication. The police came to Thessaly's door on Tuesday at 8:15 in the morning, 2 of them, polite, almost apologetic. A detective named Ruiz, with a folder under his arm, who said the words, "We'd like to ask you some questions about controlled substances," in the same tone a man uses to ask about a parking ticket. Thessaly stood in her doorway in her robe and felt the world tip sideways for the second time in 12 days. "Ma'am, do you know what hydrocodone is?" "I mopped floors." "Yes, ma'am. Do you know what it is?" "I know it's a pill." "There's a report from Mercy General." Ruiz opened the folder. "Documented count discrepancies on the 4th floor. 8 months of them. Your access badge is logged in the medication room 14 separate times." "I cleaned the medication room." "Yes, ma'am. That's what we're trying to establish." Here is how you destroy a poor woman in America. You do not need to be right. You need to be first, and you need her to be tired. By Tuesday afternoon, it was on the local news, not as an accusation, they were careful. It was sources indicate the woman in the viral video was under internal investigation prior to her separation. And that was enough. That was all it ever takes. The comment sections turned in about 4 hours. Called it. "Nobody is that nice. She was stealing pills and got caught and made a video to cover it. And y'all gave her money. The GoFundMe somebody had started, $11,000 from strangers over 2 days, was frozen by Tuesday night pending review." Thessaly sat on her floor with her back against the couch and did not cry. She'd used up crying. She just sat there, and at some point she noticed she was rubbing her bare finger where her grandmother's ring used to be, over and over, and she made herself stop. Amos found out at 8:50 a.m. He was in a suite at the Shinola downtown, where Obadiah had finally forcibly moved him, and he had a phone in his hand and no shirt on, and he said one word so loudly that a man in the next room came through the connecting door. Whitlock got there in 11 minutes. Obadiah got there in 14. From a meeting he walked out of mid-sentence. "Talk to me," Obadiah said. "Fabricated," Whitlock said. "Almost certainly. But it's good, sir. It's a real form, in a real system, with real badge data. Badge data can't be faked. Badge data isn't faked. That's what makes it good." Whitlock turned his laptop around. "Ms. Boone's badge was in that medication room 14 times over 8 months. Because she cleaned it, every second Thursday. It's on her assignment sheet. The report just doesn't mention the assignment sheet." Amos put both hands on the table. "When was the report created?" "Saturday night," Whitlock said. 11:40 p.m. The room went very still. "Backdated to November," Whitlock said. "The document metadata says November 4th. The server log says Saturday, 11:40 p.m. to 2:07 a.m., under Renata Volkov's credentials from her home IP. Obadiah Cadwallader sat down slowly. 6 hours, he said, after she watched her nephew cry on a curb. "Yes, sir." "She panicked." "She panicked," Whitlock agreed. "People do it every time. They always try one more thing." Amos hadn't moved. "Son," he said. "Dad." "Obadiah." The old man's voice was terrible. "I want you to understand something about the woman we are discussing. That woman found me on the ground. She took me into her house. She fed me for 10 days, and she sold her grandmother's ring to do it, and she never asked me for one single dollar." "I know. They have accused her of stealing from the sick." "I know, Dad." "So I want to know what you're going to do about it," Amos said, "because I am 76 years old, and I have exactly one thing left that I want to be true about my life, and it is that I did not let that happen to her." Obadiah Cadwallader looked at his father for a long moment. Then he stood up and buttoned his jacket and picked up his phone. "Whitlock, get me Ferrante, get me outside counsel, and get me every piece of that server log notarized before noon." he was already walking, and find out who chairs Mercy's board. Sir, I told you Saturday. It's Cheryl Abernathy Vaughan. Then get me Cheryl Abernathy Vaughan, Obadiah said, and remind her that Cadwallader Freight is the second largest single donor to that hospital's capital campaign, and that I would very much like to remain so. The hearing was Thursday. It wasn't a trial. Thessaly had understood by then that it was never going to be a trial. It was an administrative review in a conference room with 11 people and a pitcher of water, and the whole thing would take 90 minutes and decide the rest of her life. Renata Volkov came in a navy suit with her chin up. She had a lawyer. She had a binder. She had, Thessaly noticed, done her hair. Thessaly wore her mother's funeral dress. She had a lawyer, too, a woman named Ferrante who had appeared on Wednesday morning and said the words "my fee is handled" in a tone that closed the subject. And she had one other thing. She had an old man in a wool coat sitting in the second row of chairs with his hat in his lap, refusing to sit anywhere else. "Sir, there's a seat at the front." "I'll sit back here," Amos said. "I want to see the room." Renata went first. She was good. Thessaly would give her that for the rest of her life. The woman was good. She spoke about patient safety. She spoke about the difficult responsibility of oversight. She said she had agonized over the decision. She said she had personally hoped there was another explanation. "And when did this report come to your attention?" her lawyer asked. "In November, during a routine audit. And why wasn't it acted on then?" "Because I didn't want to believe it," Renata Volkov said, and her voice actually caught, beautifully, and she pressed 2 fingers to her lips. "She'd been with us 9 years. I kept hoping." Somebody at the table wrote something down. Thessaly stared at the water pitcher and thought very clearly, "She's going to win." Then Ferrante stood up. "Ms. Volkov, you said November." "Yes. The document is dated November 4th. "That's correct." "You reviewed it in November." "I did." "Ms. Volkov." Ferrante slid 1 page across the table. "This is the server access log for Mercy General's personnel document system for the night of Saturday the 14th. It's been notarized. Would you read the highlighted line?" The room went quiet. Renata Volkov looked at the page. She looked at it for 11 full seconds. "I'd like to speak with my counsel," she said. "Ms. Volkov, would you read the line?" "I'd like to speak with my counsel." "Document created," Ferrante read. 11:40 p.m., Saturday the 14th. Last modified 2:07 a.m. User credentials, R. Volkov. Origin IP registered to a residential address in Grosser Point Farms. She set down the page. "Ms. Volkov, you created this document 6 days ago, in your kitchen." Renata Volkov did not answer. "You created it," Ferrante said, 6 hours after a video went online showing your nephew, Courtney Volkov Bruce, whom you signed into this building at 7:52 p.m. on the 11th, weeping on a curb about what he'd done to a 76-year-old man in an alley. "That is," Renata's lawyer stood up, "that is entirely—" "We also have the transfers," Ferrante said. 4 of them. "Would you like those now, or after the recess?" Renata Volkov sat down. She sat down slowly, the way a building comes down, and she put one hand flat on the table, and Thessaly watched a woman's entire life go out of her face. The board chair called a recess. It lasted 19 minutes. When they came back, Cheryl Abernathy Vaughan read 3 sentences off a page, that the report was withdrawn in full, that Thessaly Boone's separation was rescinded as improper, that the matter of Renata Volkov was referred to the Attorney General's office and to the hospital's counsel. Renata was escorted out at 11:52 a.m. She walked past Thessaly's chair on the way. She stopped. For 1 second, the two of them were 18 inches apart, and Thessaly looked up at a woman who had tried to end her, and she waited to feel triumph. She didn't feel triumph. She felt sorry. That was the strange, terrible thing. She looked at Renata Volkov and all she could think was, "You did all that because you were scared for a boy you loved, and you burned me because I was cheaper than telling the truth, and now you've lost everything and he's still going to have to live with what he did." "Ms. Volkov," she said. Renata's eyes came up hard and bright and waiting for it. "Odessa is his grandmother too," Thessaly said. "Go call her before somebody else does." Renata Volkov's face broke. She got out of the room fast after that. They offered Thessaly her job back that afternoon. Full reinstatement, 9 years of seniority intact, back pay. A raise. They were very quick about the raise, to $19 an hour, effective immediately, and a letter of apology signed by the board chair. Thessaly said she'd think about it. Then she walked out the front doors of Mercy General, past the emergency bay where her mother had come through on a Tuesday in 2017, and she stood in the parking lot in her mother's funeral dress and breathed. Obadiah was waiting by the car. "Well, 19 an hour, she said. "That's an insult. It's 3 more than I had. Miss Boone." He opened the door for her and didn't get in. "Can I make you a different offer?" It was called the Odessa Fund. Amos named it. He'd asked permission first. He'd actually gone to a house on Junction Street and sat in a kitchen for 2 hours with a 71-year-old woman and asked if he could use her name. And Odessa Bruce had said yes, on one condition. "That boy works there," she'd said. "Not gets paid there. Works there." Courtney Volkov Bruce started on the Solvay lot in April. General labor. $26 an hour like everybody else. Nobody gave him anything and nobody protected him, and Whitlock's file on him stayed open for 2 years. He's, at the time of this telling, a shift supervisor. He has never watched the video, not once. Deshawn watched it every year on the anniversary until he got into Wayne State on the fund's second scholarship, and then he stopped because he said he didn't need it anymore. The distribution center opened 14 months later. 1,100 jobs. 26 an hour, benefits from day one, and a clause in the county agreement, Obadiah's clause, over the objection of 4 board members, that 60% of hiring had to come from within 3 miles. And the Odessa Fund had a director. She had no college degree. She had no non-profit experience. She had 9 years of pushing a bucket down a hallway at 3 in the morning and a working knowledge of exactly how a person falls through the cracks in this city, because she had watched her mother do it in 41 minutes on a sidewalk outside a Rite Aid. They gave her an office. She kept a chair by the door. Somebody was always going to need to sit down. Amos Cadwallader lived 4 more years. He spent most of them in Detroit, in a house 11 blocks from where he was born, which caused a great deal of trouble with his cardiologist, and none at all with anybody who loved him. He came to the fund every Wednesday. He brought pastries nobody had asked for. He learned the name of every single person who worked there, and he asked about their mothers. He died in the spring, at home, with his son holding one hand and Thessaly Boone holding the other. His obituary in the Free Press ran 400 words about a $4 billion company. The one Thessaly wrote and read out loud at Delray Baptist to a church so full they opened the doors and put chairs on the steps was 11 words long. He was a man who found out who we really were. Obadiah came back the next spring, not in a suit, not in an SUV. He drove himself, in a car nobody looked at twice, and he parked on Werner outside the check-cashing place and sat there for 4 minutes before he could make himself get out. He had flowers. He'd bought them at the Eastern Market, where his grandfather had loaded produce trucks, and he'd stood in front of the stall for so long that the woman running it finally said, "Baby, is she worth this much thinking?" "Yes, Mom." "Then get the peonies and go." He got the peonies. He went up the stairs, the same stairs his father had climbed with a stranger's arm under his shoulders. And he stood outside a door he'd stood outside exactly once before, on the worst day of that woman's life. He knocked. Thessaly opened it. She looked at him. She looked at the flowers. She looked back at him, and something came into her face that had been coming for 4 years and had never once been said out loud by either of them, because there had always been a reason not to. "Obadiah Cadwallader," she said. "Miss Boone. You know I still live over a check-cashing place." "I know." "They offered me the salary. I gave it back. I take what I made at the hospital plus the raise, and the rest goes in the fund." She crossed her arms. "Everybody thinks that's crazy. It is crazy. Then why are you smiling?" Obadiah Cadwallader stood in a hallway in Delray holding $14 worth of peonies. "Because my father sat on a sidewalk for 19 days, he said, trying to find one person in this whole city who'd be kind when there was nothing in it for them." Thessaly's eyes filled. "And he found her," Obadiah said, "and I've spent 4 years trying to work up the nerve to knock on her door." They were married in October at Delray Baptist, in the church his mother took him to. Odessa Bruce sat in the second row. Courtney stood in the back in a suit he'd bought himself and did not sit down the entire service. There was one empty chair at the front on the aisle with a folded wool coat laid across it. The coat had belonged to Thessaly's husband, who died in 2019. Then it belonged to an old man in an alley who had nothing, and now it just sat there in the front of a church, in the seat of a man who wasn't there, in front of a whole neighborhood that got 1,100 jobs because on one gray Tuesday morning, a tired woman with $4 in her purse looked into an alley and stopped. That's the whole thing. That's the entire story. Somebody was on the ground and she stopped. The end.